Hello, everybody. I am Donal Murphy, and this is my podcast, Layoffs over Lattes, and you are welcome to it. Getting laid off can be a very scary experience, particularly when it comes to financial security. The mortgage or rent payments don't stop, supporting one's family doesn't stop. There are childcare expenses, school expenses, groceries, gas, utilities, and so on. In an ideal world, you'll have received a severance package that can alleviate some of that worry, and I hope you have. In this episode, we dig into the monetary steps that you can take to make yourself feel more comfortable navigating your job search without an income, and what you can do to give yourself a little more financial peace of mind so that you are freed up to focus undeterred on securing your next job. My guest today is Tom O'Brien. He is a partner at Vantage Wealth Management, focused on providing a comprehensive approach to financial security. He works with his clients to achieve their financial objectives by offering professional guidance in creating financial plans and strategies, asset management, risk management, tax strategies, and estate planning. He started his career back in 2008, motivated to utilize his analytical abilities while focusing on working with people and not the numbers, although the numbers are important. But I think you'll hear in the course of this episode that Tom is very human focused. It is important for me to point out right ahead of this episode, from a compliance standpoint, that Tom O'Brien is participating in this podcast in his individual capacity. Any opinions, projections, or forward-looking statements expressed herein are solely those of Tom O'Brien and may differ from Vantage Wealth Management's views or opinions. So with that, let's get on with the episode. So, Tom, welcome to the Layoffs Over Lattes podcast. Delighted to have you here. And before we get going, as I say in front of every episode, remind our listeners and watchers that I do want to emphasize that this podcast is produced for educational and entertainment purposes only. It does not substitute for seeking the advice and help of a trained professional, whether that's a licensed psychologist, a medical doctor, or any other qualified professional. In this case, we're going to be talking about finances as it pertains to layoffs. So it does not take the substitute for seeking actual advice from a trained financial professional. The other disclaimer that I want to mention before we get going is Tom actually is my investment advisor and my financial advisor. We have worked together now for, 10, 15 years. It's probably safe to say that I am Tom's poorest client. Tom serves high net worth individuals. I am not in that category. Whatever the opposite of high net worth is, that's me. But I will say that I would prefer what I am to Tom, which is his favorite client, over his richest or high net worth client. So we can't have everything, but if any of his clients who happen to be stumbling upon this podcast want to switch places, I might consider it, depending on how wealthy you are. So anyway, Tom, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to see you as always. So the very first question that I ask all of my guests is the following, and you have had a very successful career in investment and financial advisory services. You've actually also had, prior to your current career, you were a successful pharmaceutical sales professional. So you've pivoted. Maybe we'll have you on again to talk about how you pivot in your career. But the first question I ask everybody is, as a kid, what did you actually want to do when you grew up?
Yeah, so I was convinced that I was going to live abroad and be an expat, and every year or two be reassigned to a new exciting country. And that occurred ever since I had the luck of going to Europe when I was 16. So I just knew oh, there's this whole other world out there. And I was from a fairly small town. There's a whole other world out there. And you get to choose as an adult where you're going to live. So why would I not choose to live in these fun, new, exciting places? And so that was what I was certain I would do. Uh, and
So
that's
an
how
ex-
I ended up. That's how I ended up in the medical world. Is it was actually a device, not pharmaceuticals, but it's
okay,
similar. And I was with a large company, and they had positions all over the world. And I thought that could be an opportunity for me to get my foot in the door to becoming an expat. Um, and that's why you and I, our friendship goes so well, because the accent gives you that feel. And the big pivot for me was when I knew that I wanted that, but I also knew that I wanted to have children, and those children I wanted to have stable schools, and those children I wanted to coach their athletic teams, and it didn't connect between the two, and so the trade off is that I try to do extended travel or remote work when I can, which is not the same, but that was the trade off.
right. Um, so you have had a successful career in financial advisory and management. So let's get into it. Um, so the first question that I have for you is, what do you think is the biggest mistake that you see people make after a layoff financially?
Yeah. Well, the first thing I would say is that all the things that we're going to talk about on this interview are conversations that I have had. I've been doing this almost seven or just over 17 years now. And even with that in mind, none of this should be considered specific advice,
Right,
because
right,
the marketing term is everybody's unique, and well, there's some reality to the fact that there are a lot of moving parts in this financial picture for each client. So do not take this as advice, please, because this is just general advice. So in terms of the biggest mistake that I see people make is that for the folks that are already financially independent or have a large enough wealth where they're not too concerned about a period of unemployment, let's just assume that this is not directed at them, right? Because I don't think they're going to get a ton of value from the next few comments. But for the folks that are not in that position, the biggest mistake that I see them making is decisions that are based out of fear. This, oh my gosh, this life changing moment has occurred, and no one's arguing that it's not life changing, but this life change. But the financial decisions that you need to make are the ones that you need to make. The things that are not required decisions that can be put off till later should be put off till later. The guidance that I give someone who is unexpectedly laid off is not all that different than what I would tell a widow or a widower when they've lost a spouse. Of there's going to be a lot of things that you're going to be worried about. Let's try to focus on the things that actually are critically important right now, and the things that are very important but aren't needing to be decided right now, let's just put them off till later. Let's just focus on the things, the immediate fires that are burning. So I would say the biggest mistake I see is when people rush into these big decisions. They say, oh, I got to cash out my retirement account. I need to get all these new credit card numbers. I have to cancel all my subscriptions or any fixed expenses that are going through. I'm selling my car. They're just making these dramatic decisions that are not going to benefit them in the long run.
So then, following on from that, how can somebody assess their financial runway and then prioritize expenses, during unemployment?
Yeah. Well, I think that's the biggest step towards getting back to a sense of calm. I'm not saying it's going to feel like security, but it might feel like calm. So we need to understand what's going on each month. And when I say that, it's not just a total number. We really need to understand what's going out each month that's a need or a structural spending, which would be things like your house, basic food, any insurance, fixed debt payments that are required to be. What's going out? Those are the structural need-based expenses. Anything else is categorized as a want, right? Want can
Right.
be fairly broad, but want would be anything that is not in that other category. And we need to understand what those two are, because it's not enough to say, oh, I'm spending 10 grand a month, so I need to be able to support 10 grand a month. Well, we need to understand of that 10, how critical is the 10? We really need to dig into it. Because as you're going through this, it's going to be painful because you're going to realize you were spending on things that you didn't realize. You're going to realize that you're spending on things that don't match your values, which at any income level, that's what causes the most friction of the people that I work with. Your money is a reflection of your values, and your spending is a reflection of your values. And if they don't line up, sometimes this exercise can really be take your breath away kind of moment. So you get your wants, you get your needs figured out. Look through and see, based on this total number, how many months do I think I could support myself and my family, if it applies, until I can get the next role?
Mm-hmm.
And only you will have a general sense as to how long it might take for you to get a new role. And I realize that that's a really unknown question. But if you have a high level executive job, it's usually a year or two till you find another high level executive job. If you have an hourly job at the local grocery store, next week you could probably get another job. So you're going to have to understand how long that might take. And then you look at what you've got saved and accessible in less painful type buckets. So checkings and savings and maybe even CDs. And if you have Roths, sometimes you can use Roths. How long can I support that? And if those numbers don't line up, you've got a problem. If it's going to take me 2 years to get a job and I only have 12 months of things, that's the problem. So instead of panicking about the problem, we just say, okay, how do we change that? Well, you can look at the wants and pare back things that are wanted but not critical until you get to the point where you've got those months available. And then if you still have a gap between what you've got saved and what you need, that's when you, in addition to looking for a job, need to be thinking about how can I get other income? What other strategies could I do to plug that gap? The point is not to, the last thing, the point is not to cut every joy out of your life. That is not the point of this. But the point is that the longer you can get that period of time to be covered, the more time you will allow yourself to be thoughtful in this career search, right? Because you don't want to be desperate and come into every interview in a desperate position. And then all of a sudden you're stuck with a job that you hate for the next 5 years.
Yeah.
We want a good career, good job, something that can get us to that next chapter of our life in a way that makes us feel rewarded.
Yeah. I will go on record in saying that when I was working and I was paid well and the money that came in was more than I needed for, my monthly expenses. But I truly never knew what my monthly expenses were. I kind of had an idea, but because there was more money coming in than I was spending, I was like, I don't really need to know. And when I got laid off, that was one of the first things I did. I was like, I got to figure out what my monthly expenses are. To your point, what are the wants in there and what are the needs in there, and then figure out how much of a runway that I have. And it's embarrassing for me to say, in public on this podcast that I didn't know prior to getting laid off. But the fact that I get laid off and it actually forced me to figure out what my expenses are on a monthly basis was a great exercise for me. And something I probably should have done, years ago. Probably as my financial advisor, you probably not good for you to hear this, but
well, I'm fairly certain I asked you to do that exercise. The motivation may not have been there previously, but that exercise is helpful again at all income levels. There's no real change to it. If you make $5,000 a month, you will spend $5,000 a month. If you make $20,000 a month, you will spend $20,000 a month. If you make $100,000 a month, you will likely spend $100,000 a month.
Yeah.
We just inflate our lifestyle into those incomes, whatever those may be. And if we go through the exercise of seeing what we need and what we want, we frequently will trim off a lot of the I would call it waste. It's just spending that doesn't match our values. It's not critical. And if we really thought about how we could use that money, we would rather use it for other things than what we're using it for. And so that exercise is really helpful.
The other thing too that I really want to emphasize, which I think, as you said, which is getting laid off and understanding what your needs or wants are, doesn't mean that you have to give up the things that give you joy? You know, I like a nice cup of coffee, so it's not like I still don't go out to my local coffee shop and buy myself a cup of coffee every now and again and just sit in a cafe and enjoy that experience. I will
Yeah,
say,
the other thing I would add to that is just that these cuts that you're making are not permanent cuts,
right, right,
right? This is a temporary period of time
right.
until such time that the income resumes, and then you can
Yeah,
resume some of them. So don't think about it. Think about it as, oh, I can't imagine not having Netflix. Oh, well, could you not have Netflix for 6 months? For nine? Like, there's got to be a period of time where you're okay pretty much without any of that stuff.
right. Um, moving into the next question is, what role does mental health play in financial decision making during a career transition in your mind?
Yeah. Reiterating your disclosure at the beginning that I'm not a mental health professional, but getting laid off is a form of trauma. If you didn't see it coming in particular,
Yep,
it's a form of trauma.
yep,
And so treating it with that importance and treating it with that significance in your life, I think, is justified and will serve you well. Trying to act as though it is not a big deal is where you will get yourself into more trouble. But it is a temporary state. So you have to just accept the fact that you're in this tumultuous period, but it is a temporary state, and you can get yourself out of it. You will do the things. The work that you were doing had value before. You will find a new home where you can get value into those things. For me, the things that keep me grounded and centered would be the same if I was in a period of unemployment or not, which is trying to get good sleep, trying to get some exercise every day, trying to be grateful for what I do have going in my life, and trying to breathe and be calm and regularly breathe, think about the moment. And that doesn't change when you're searching for a job. If I interview people, and now I'm on the side where I'm interviewing people instead of interviewing, which is really different for me, you can notice if someone really needs the job or if they don't. You can notice if someone hasn't slept for a few days because you can tell that they're all stressed out. You can notice. So you want to put your best foot forward for those opportunities that you do get. And I think those all go hand in hand. We want to be treating our body and our mind with importance, and then acknowledge the fact that it's a traumatic experience, but take the steps to get ourselves through it and out of it.
Yeah, and having yourself in balance allows you to make good financial decisions. Um, I've said this on other episodes, which is that a layoff is not an isolated experience just for you.
Mm,
There are spouses involved, there are partners, there are children involved. So, how should someone approach conversations with family
yeah,
about financial changes during a layoff?
yeah. Well, every family dynamic is so different. From my perspective, most of the time, it benefits if there's a partner involved, that the partner is kept in the loop, that you're honest with them, that you explain what happened, what your expectations are for going to happen, and then what are the things you're going to be doing to try to get you there. Uh, Panicking is not going to help, though your partner may be the one that's most capable of lifting you up and calming you, depending on your relationship. But including them and honestly explaining, show them that the work that we just talked about. Well, I looked through all our needs and wants. It looks like we're going to be fine for the next 9 months. Well, that's much more reassuring than I've got no income and I don't know when it's going to start. And that's not the message that any partner would want to hear. Um, for your kids, so I've had clients that have gone through this and they opted to include their kids in the conversations. So your kids are going to hear what you tell them, and they're going to interpret what you are feeling. That's how like kids, I think, reflect our feelings. And so if you include them, they may very well step up to the occasion. I have found the kids are more resilient than I give them credit for. I have twins that are 13, and they're more resilient than I give them credit for. So this client that went through it, they brought their kids in, and their kids are a little younger. They might be 15, 11, 9, something like that. And they said, hey, it's going to be a little tight for a while. We're working on this financial transition. Everything's going to be fine. All the things that you still wanted to do, we're still going to be able to do for you. You just need to be patient with us. It may take us some time to get there. The kids went all in on making Christmas gifts that year. They're like, oh, we don't need to buy any. Let's
Sweet.
just make stuff. And they made
Sweet.
things that they were really proud of. And when they handed
Yeah,
it to their
yeah.
siblings and their parents, they were excited. Uh,
That's
they stopped going
fantastic.
out to eat and door dashing food as often.
Yeah,
And the result of that is that they were eating healthier food at the house.
yeah,
And I think that if you incorporate those family moments into it, they're not going to look back on it as a negative period of time. They're going to say, if they remember it all, they're going to say, oh, yeah, I remember when that happened. I just remember that we made these crazy Christmas things and I loved it. Looking at it now, it was horrible or whatever it may be. Uh, and that was when I first learned how to cook an egg because we were cooking at home all the time. I didn't know how to do that. And I think you build resiliency in your
yeah.
children if you include them.
Agreed.
Not every child's going to respond the same, and I'm not saying they all do, but I believe that they will rise to the occasion. And again, it is a temporary state. It is not a new normal. It is not a new permanent state. And that's how I would approach bringing the kids in. Is I think they're going to know whether you choose to bring them in or not. I think they're going to know, and you might as well have some control of the narrative. Or um,
Yeah, I agree. And then speaking from a personal perspective, I have an 11-year-old son, Dylan. And when I got laid off, I did sit him down and I said, "Hey, Dylan, I don't have a job anymore. I lost my job. Company was not doing well, and when company's not doing well, you know, some of the things that can happen are people lose their jobs." Um, and I said, my full time job now is finding a full time job. And I kind of sat there and so I'm kind of take it in, and there wasn't much back and forth. He was like, okay, but what's cute is that periodically he'll swing back around and be like, hey, Dad, how's your job search going? And so that's very sweet. And then
yeah,
just this past weekend, he wanted to go to the art store and get a sketch pad and some markers, and I was because I love to support anything that he chooses to take an interest in. I think that's my role as a dad. And so I was planning on going to the art store and buying him a sketch pad and some markers. But what was very, very sweet is as we're going out the door, he went back into his room and he grabbed some of his birthday money and he bought himself the sketch pad and the markers because I think he's conscious of. Because I too explain it as we just need to be more conscious of money now. We're not going to run out of money, but we just need to be more conscious of our spending. And I think because I planted that seed, I think the automatic decision, or in terms of when I buy him stuff, is or when he wants stuff, is I'll buy him.
yeah,
But I think the fact that he was like, oh, okay, well, my dad's not working. I'll buy my sketch pad and markers. And I thought that was a
yeah.
very sweet moment. So
It
I
sounds
do.
that's a growing moment right there,
Yeah,
right? That can only made possible with situations like this. So
yeah, yeah,
there is a bright side of all of it. And if I
yeah.
think about the money that I spend on the family for dinners out or trips or whatever it may be, the benefit of those things is the time together. It's the time together. So if you can't go to someplace exotic, you go to the backyard. My son loves camping in the backyard. He thinks it is so much fun. It costs us $0
Yeah,
because we already own the camping gear. And if I said, hey, we're going to have a week camp out, we're just going to barbecue stuff, sleep in the tent, hang out with the dog, he would think that was the most exciting trip ever.
that's
And
fantastic.
that does not cost flights. That does not cost hotels. That does not cost rental cars. That does not cost restaurants. So we just need to kind of peel back the layers of what we're doing it for. And I think you'll find that all the reasons you were doing things for still exist and you can still provide. So that doesn't concern me.
That's a sweet story. Um, so are there some creative ways to generate income while searching for a new job, as you understand?
Yeah. Well, I think that gets to what we talked about early on, right? If there's a gap between that savings component and the amount of time that you might be out, we got to plug it somehow. Uh, one of the things that I have found in conversations, and I see it also on. So if someone comes to me and says, I don't really want to work anymore, but I'm not able to be retired, then we can talk through what's called a semi-retirement.
Right.
And what that means is instead of making 250 grand a year, they're making 80 grand a year.
Mm-hmm.
And they think to themselves, oh my gosh, why would I do that? I used to be making so much more. And the reason they would do that is because they don't have to do the job they hate. They get to do the job they love.
Mm-hmm.
And it allows them to make that move because they needed the at least an 80 grand a year number. So with this side job thing, the only thing I would say is that if you were making good money before and you can only make you're making less with these side gigs, we're not focused on what you were making before and trying to recreate that. We're trying to see how many more weeks we can get, how many more months we can get of this job search time before the wheels come off, right? We run out of that savings bucket. And so don't be looking at it with, oh, I was making $100 an hour. Now I can only make $40. Well, $40 an hour might cover you for several more weeks of what you needed to fill that gap or whatever it may be. Uh, in terms of what you can do, I mean, everyone knows a certain amount of things. You could drive for Uber or Lyft, or you could do some sort of gig economy type job, but you have an expertise most likely in whatever you were doing that you were laid off from. And there is value to that skill. So maybe there's freelancing, or maybe there's contract work, or maybe I don't know if it's community. Let's say you were a web designer or whatever, and you could just reach out on your local neighborhood app and say, "Hey, I'm between jobs right now, and I'm doing a discount on websites for the community." You know, they're a very easy way to become self-employed. You don't need to set up a business license right away. You don't need to do that stuff. If you're just doing a little bit, you start there. If it grows into something, you'll definitely want to consult with a tax professional or even an attorney. Uh, but don't let that slow you down.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
definitely things you can do. I had a friend that had a hobby project where he sold his own stuff, and so he would go through his closets, through his storage, through and anything he could find that he was just no longer using but thought might have value, and he got thousands of dollars worth of
Hmm.
stuff sold, of just things that he had not gotten around to getting rid of, either donating or whatever it may be. And so many of us have things that have accumulated over the years that do have some
Yeah.
value.
Yeah.
It's just so that can be another little side puzzle, because when you think about what you're going to do in your day, you structure your day, it's pretty hard to imagine that one would find 8 hours of job search.
Yeah. Well, I don't think it's recommended.
So I would think you'd have a portion that's job search. You'd have a portion, like I said, that is fitness and health and trying to keep your mind fresh. You could have a portion doing this other work,
Yeah.
selling your own stuff, doing the side. But there's certainly ways to do it. The mind shift just needs to be, I don't need to try to recreate that other income stream. I just need to create some income to help stem the bleeding here.
Yeah. Exactly. Um, so I think it's safe to say that in your line of work, networking, getting your name out there, building your book of business relies on doing good networking, tapping into, not only your initial network, but the concentric circles of reaching more networks. So, and you've done that really well. So, kind of piggybacking on that, any advice on how people can maintain or build a professional network during unemployment?
Yeah. So I was 27 when I started in this.
Hmm.
So I think it's fair to say I had nearly zero of a network.
Right.
You know, there was no networking event that I wouldn't try. I mean, I tried all of them. Um, the There's an organization or a website called meetup.com, I think. I don't think it's still around. I would go to those all the time just to try to meet people with similar hobbies, similar ideas, similar values in some ways. Chambers of commerce. I was active in all the chambers of commerce meetings. All these different things just to keep yourself out there and get your message tighter and tighter. So the way that I feel that I benefited from that effort was not in getting lots and lots of clients, but I honed my message from repeating it over and over and over to the point where I think when I did get those opportunities to work with someone, I was ready for it because I had been talking about it in all these networking groups.
Yeah.
Um, the biggest thing that I would say in terms of getting help from your network is that even people that care about you and love you, if you say, who do you know that could help? That's just not specific enough.
Right.
There's
Yeah.
just no way that if someone
Yeah.
asked me that, I say, I don't have any idea. I know lots of people. I've been doing this a long time. I've been networking for a long time. I don't know how to help you.
Right.
But if you said, Well, what I'm really interested in is this type of a role with a company in this sort of phase of its life. And these are 5 companies that
Yeah,
I think would be great. Well, then in my head, I'm thinking, all right, these companies, I know these people. Who are the people that I know in those companies? All right, they're not in that role. This, and then all of a sudden, it's narrowed down my mental Rolodex to a specific 3 people.
right,
And
right.
then you say, oh yeah, absolutely, they would be happy to talk. And then that to me is the job hunt. Is you have coffee or a walk or a lunch with those people to learn about what they're doing, to find out what their teams are working on, what their career path has been, and maybe they know someone that is hiring, but
Hmm.
maybe they just know someone else in a similar role like that, and they connect you to the next person.
Right.
And it's just that activity is what's going to create that momentum. And if you don't consistently have those conversations, it's hard to build the momentum. But if you don't ask specifically, it's hard to get the momentum even started.
Yeah,
You know?
I think that's the key thing here is which is be specific.
And I don't know how
Uh,
many people have applied for jobs and they hear, "Oh, sorry, that job's already been filled, but we were just sort of required to post it," or whatever. Because a lot of it is just relationships, and the relationships are what are going to get you in the door.
yeah, and
Even now, it's gotten harder than it used to be, but it's still relationships still matter.
yeah, and the ideal is you have that relationship or you have that conversation even before the job is posted. It's a ton of time to actually post a job and look at
Yeah,
resumes and look at applications. And I think people are just trying to get to hiring the right person as quickly as possible. So if you can cut them off at the pass, I think
yeah.
that's a win-win for everybody.
Yeah, I remember I got an interview one time with a consulting group out of business when I was out of business school. And I just called someone who I knew and I said, "Hey, I'm thinking about becoming a business consultant because I heard that they live all over the country and they
Hmm.
move every 2 years."
Going
And,
back to what you wanted to do when
and
you
it was
grew up.
so dramatically, so dramatic and exciting. Uh, and he said, "Oh, okay, I'll have him give you a call." And so I got a call to set up the interview for one of the top consulting firms. And you can go to the library and rent books on how to get interviews with these consulting firms because they are so challenging to get. And so I get to my interview and the guy says, "This must be some mistake. I don't even have a resume for you." And I said, "Yeah, no, I never formally applied." He goes, "How did you get this call?" You know, those relationships still do matter,
Yeah.
and being active is the only way to nurture them.
Going back to what you touched on earlier, and want to kind of flesh this out, but what are some financial moves that somebody should avoid at all costs
Yeah,
during a layoff?
yeah. Uh, so again, this isn't specific advice to anyone listening to this podcast, uh, but the things that are difficult to dig yourself out of are things like emptying your retirement account or assuming a sizable amount of debt that's at either a high interest or a variable interest where you can't control the payments. Uh, those are the big ones. It's not to say that those aren't unfortunately still going to be required, right? If money is needed to keep the lights on, money is needed to keep the lights on. But those should be taken very intentionally. And so the way that I typically look at it is let's try to focus on the easier things first. So checking, savings, CDs would be the kind of thing to access first. CDs, there can be some penalties to closing them out, but it's still likely better than other options. If you have an investment account, stock account, brokerage account, something like that, that is not a retirement account, that can
Yeah.
be another one. There are some tax consequences to anything you do there potentially. Uh, then you can get to possibly using some sort of equity line of credit on your house, something like that. Those are not low interest rate these days, but they're certainly not as high as a credit card. The risk there is that you're burdening your home with additional debt.
Hmm.
Your home is the asset, so you need to be fully aware that if you default on the debt, that
Hmm.
your house could be at risk. Another example of bringing your spouse in or your partner in case make sure that they're not surprised by that development. Some 401ks will allow you to take a hardship loan. That can be another place where you could possibly access some money. That's a good reminder that there are reasons to not roll your 401k directly to an IRA if you might need to access some of the funds through a loan or something like that. Because
Right.
once the money's out of the
Right.
401k, that feature no longer exists.
Right.
Um, and then from there, retirement accounts potentially can be used. If you had any money in a Roth IRA or Roth 401k, it's possible you could access some money from there without any tax or penalties. Your contributions can come back out if they've been more than 5 years seasoned in the accounts. Otherwise, IRAs, 401ks are kind of next, unfortunately. IRAs and 401ks do have one unique feature where once per year, you can do an indirect rollover,
Uh-huh.
which means I can take money out of a retirement account and I have 60 days to put it back into a retirement account. It can be the same one, it can be a different one. But as long as you put it back within 60 days, there's no tax, no penalty. Only get it once a year. And there's no cap of how much you could do in it. But I did have someone who took money out of their IRA. In this situation, it was for a business that they were acquiring, and they had temporary financing gap, and so they took some money out of an IRA, were able to refund it within the 60 days, so there was no tax, no penalty. So there are some strategic ways that you could possibly access cash, but you can see the glaring possible mine to step on here, and that is you take it out with the best intentions of replacing it,
Yeah.
and you don't. When all of a sudden, if you're not 59 and a half, you're going to owe 10% penalty, and it's fully taxable.
Right.
Come April of the following year. So there are certainly some concerns there. So don't do that lightly. But
Yeah.
there are some ways there, and that's sort of how I would try to address the needs. And so the decisions that you avoid is trying to put everything on a credit card, thinking you're going to be able to pay it off with 20%, 25% interest is a really difficult hurdle to get past.
Yeah. And again, emphasizing that none of these decisions should ever be made without
Yeah,
consulting with a
there's
financial
so many
advisor or
factors.
a tax
Yeah,
advisor. Yeah.
good
Yeah.
point.
Yeah. Kind of coming into the home stretch here, how would you recommend people staying motivated and positive during a prolonged job search?
Yeah. So the closest that I can relate this to is when I got started in this business and needing to build a book. It's not being laid off, but I went from a strong income
Yeah.
in the medical device space to very low income in the financial services space. So there's it rhymes. Not the same, but it rhymes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so start every day, make your bed, take a shower, and get dressed. That process of just getting the day going will help you for the rest of the day. So as
Uh-huh.
long as you can do that every morning, it'll help you for the rest of the day. It sounds silly, but it makes a big difference. The other thing that I can relate to is that sometimes it can be difficult to know if it was a productive day. You can feel like you're just spinning your wheels and you're not sure if you made any progress. Or Tom talked about momentum, but how do I know if there's any momentum, whatever it may be? So the way that we used to try to evaluate whether it was a good day was just based on activity. So for someone who's looking for a job, I would think it would be, how many job applications did I submit? How many new contacts did I make? Or how many of my old contacts did I schedule some time with? And then how many new interviews or meetings did I schedule? And you just set different numbers for each of those things. So let's say I got to apply to 5 jobs, or I have to make 2 or 3 new contacts, or I got to schedule 1 to 2 new interviews. And you don't have to do all of them, but if you do any of them, then you can say it was a productive day. It was a productive day. I did one of those things. I don't know if any of it's going to mean anything, but all of it is activity. And if you find yourself a few weeks later that you're not getting the results you want, well, then you need to increase those numbers.
Right.
You just need to increase the one or all of those numbers so that you can ramp up that activity until you get to the point where you're thinking, oh my gosh, there's like interview after interview, or I'm meeting so many people and I'm having these great conversations, and you can see that it's come. Then you're at the right spot, but you need to be able to dial in those numbers.
I think having a
Yeah.
structure is important.
The last piece is that for me, I got rejected far more often than I got accepted, right? That's just the nature of sales, and
Yeah.
that's just the nature of life, really. So at the beginning, every time someone said no, I was thinking they don't like me. I'm not smart enough. I'm not good looking enough. I could have said this better. I didn't the meeting should have been shorter, the meeting should have been longer, I should have talked more, I should have talked less, whatever it may be. But it was rejection
Yeah.
shining on me. Well, sometimes it's just timing. Sometimes it is just that it's not a good fit. Sometimes they had a bad day. Sometimes they had already decided to work somewhere else. They just felt obligated to meet because I was nice. And they
Yeah.
thought I was really nice.
Yeah.
And they just felt like they should meet. So the same thing with this process is the rejections feel personal, but it is not really a personal decision. It's not a good fit, or that hiring person had a bad day, or you had a bad day, or it's just there. It's just, but that's not it's not validating or invalidating your worth, right? It's nothing to do with it. You just have to say, you know what? I got to get to a whole bunch of no's till I get to that next yes. It just got through one of the no's. The yes is just one stop closer. And you got to have, and I know it's easier to say that than to do it. I understand it's easier said than done, that to me, it needs to be the mentality to keep you focused and keep you going as best you can.
Sage advice.
And when you have a week where all 5 days you hit those targets, that's worth celebrating. So,
Yeah.
you know what? I had a great week. No, I didn't get a job. These other things, but that was a really good week. I set those targets. I held myself to the targets. I hit the targets. That's a good week. And then the opportunities will come.
Yep. One final question for you, and is there one piece of advice that you'd wished you'd received earlier in your career about navigating uncertainty? And you did talk about the fact that you did pivot in your career, and you went from
Yeah.
being a high earner to having no income
Yeah.
when you made the switch from pharmaceutical devices to financial services. So what would you have liked to have known back then that you know now?
Yeah. Well, the financial services industry is the people you talk to and you meet to are typically the ones that have beat the odds and are still around doing it. But the reality is that very few people make it past 3 years. Right? It's less than 90% plus fail out in the first 3 years.
Interesting.
There was a funny story where my sister was on a flight, and the guy sitting next to her was in the military, and he said, "Oh," he goes chatting her up. He said, what's your family?" And she goes, "Oh, my brother's a financial advisor." And he goes, "Really? How long has he been doing it?" And she said, "Oh, like 12 years, something like that." And he said, "They have a lower success rate than Navy SEAL training." And he thought that was so impressive, and so she thought it was impressive. It was kudos. It was a point for me as the brother. But I think what I had wished that I had known was that while you are succeeding in building this, you are not going to feel like you are succeeding.
Yeah.
It's not until looking back that you say, "Oh, I guess that was actually going really well. That's what success looked like." And so I think that uncertainty when you're in it is just how it feels. Like you
Right.
don't get that clarity until later. And so if you're feeling uncertain, that's how you're supposed to feel. That you're in the middle. You've just experienced a trauma. You could argue that you were in the middle of a trauma, depending on the financial picture it's put you in. And it is supposed to feel uncertain. Like that's just how it's going to feel. And then once you find that new opportunity, and so I think for me, I wish someone had explained that feeling that I was having about, is this going to work? Is it not? That's how you're supposed to feel. That wasn't doubt.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
that's just what it feels like, and then control what you can control, do those daily activities. Like I said, hold yourself accountable to those daily activities, and just have faith and trust that it will work out, because it will work out. You
Yeah.
just got to hold yourself to it.
Well, Tom, thank you so much. I think people who have watched this or listened to this will understand why feel so blessed to have you in my corner all these years because first of all, you're smart. You offer so much great insight. You're a great friend. So it was delightful to have you on this episode. Before we sign off, if people wanted to understand the services that are either offered by you or your colleagues at Vantage Wealth Management, and maybe you wanted to understand what it took to be a client, how can they find you or reach out to you?
Yeah, so I work with a firm called Vantage Wealth Management out of San Mateo. We have clients all over the country, so geography is not a restrictor at this point. And what we try to do is provide thoughtful, objective guidance through the most critical moments of your life. We're there when it is stormy, and we are there when it is calm. But we try to be there providing advice where we can. If anyone's interested, you can find us online. If you search for Tom O'Brien, financial advisor, Tom O'Brien, San Mateo, Vantage Wealth Management, San Mateo. Shouldn't have any problem finding us. And if you reach out, we can schedule a intro talk. There's never any cost to the intro call. We can see if it's a good fit for me, a good fit for you. Otherwise, there's other team members here that might be interested in building that relationship with someone who's interested.
Great. Well, thank you, Tom. You're the best. And we'll talk soon. Thanks for being here.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me, Donald.
Okay.
This has been a treat.
Cheers.
Cheers.